Welcome to Thrive Radio. I'm your host, Amy Montgomery, entrepreneur and digital marketing agency owner. Today, my guest is Pete Walsh. He's the master coach and trusted advisor with 30 years of family business experience. He uses humor, compassion, and tough love to guide family business and executive clients. He's the author of Coach to Win, The Leadership Game. And Pete has coached many successful small and mid-sized family businesses across the U.S. Through the Family Business Performance Center, he helps families build stronger relationships and sustainable businesses. His peak workout business coaching transforms leaders to transform their organizations. Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me be here. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely. So can we start with your journey? And I would love to know the pivotal moment that made you transition from corporate vice president to becoming a master certified coach.
How much time do we have? I'm kidding. No, I'll give you the short version of it. I was at church with my wife and kids. I like to say that I'm highly spiritual, although not highly religious, a recovering Catholic. I was at church. I was not satisfied with what I was doing as a corporate vice president in my family business. Don't lose sight of that. And the sermon was about finding your special gift. I prayed in that moment and said, help me find what mine is, because I know I can hit a home run for you. Those were my exact words. 3 days later, a friend of mine said, who owned a construction company, said, our coach said this. And I said, your coach? Who's that? And they said, somebody that helps us develop our plans and hold us accountable. And I said, you're kidding. That's a job? Oh my God. My life turned on a dime. I ran home and told Karen, I said, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to be a coach. I was a coaching leader already. I love getting the teams together, rehearsing, talking about what we could do, practicing, going out on the field, coming back. And so I knew right then, but the lesson in that also, Amy, is I tell people, ask and you will receive. Ask the universe, put out intentions, write a journal, dream about that. See, had I not asked, I might not have been paying attention 3 days later when my friend said that. So that was the pivotal moment. I then hired a coach, loved what we did, went to coaching school, all while I kept my vice president job. And I started coaching people nights and weekends. And then I went back to my president of our company and said, I'm going to go be a coach. And he said, you're kidding. And I told my mother and other people, and they're like, you're kidding. Because nobody had heard of a coach back then. Coaching was not a thing. I'm going to have my 25th anniversary in September. And so that was the pivotal moment. And I knew it was the right thing. So I tell people a lot, what are you putting out in the world? What are you thinking about? That's another thing that you say sometimes is like, your life is a reflection of your thoughts. So whatever you think about, whatever intentions you put out there. And then I started on my coaching journey.
I love that. So powerful. In your experience, what are the most common challenges mid-sized companies and CEOs face when it comes to leadership development?
What happens is we take the maybe the smartest architect or the best architect, and then we tell him or her to start leading a team of architects. So what happens is we promote people that might be good at something technically, but that doesn't mean they're a good leader. So I spend a lot of time with companies, leaders, CEOs, teaching them what is leadership actually and how can you get good at it. So I think one of the big mistakes is promoting people that may or may not be good leaders. Additionally, not providing them the tools and training to become a good leader. And then what happens is if they don't become a good leader, you're going to have turnover. You could lose that good architect you had. You could lose somebody who was really good. So promoting people and not giving them the resources. And that's really partly where coaching comes in and leadership coaching. Teach them how to be leaders. And I just have to say real quick, there's a leader, a mentor, a coach, a manager, an individual contributor. So even leader itself, when we say leader, some people think like this one thing. There's a lot of different roles within leadership. And I help people understand those, identify them, and then get better at them.
Yeah, I love that.
As leadership the same? gotten easier or harder with COVID, with remote work, with social media. My thought also is leadership has become exponentially more difficult in the last few years. So when
Oh
I was
yeah.
first a leader 35, 40 years ago, they didn't have a smartphone in their hand. We were like a paternal company. They trusted us, they liked us, respected us. Nowadays, all of that's changed. So you have to your leadership skills have to be much more developed, sophisticated, effective. People aren't going to put up with this shit anymore. They're going
Yeah.
to just, people don't leave a company, they leave a leader. And if you read, if you look at the statistics, there are higher levels of stress right now across most categories. And so people are stressed out, man. They're
Yeah.
distracted, they're stressed out. And so their tolerance for bad leadership is probably lower than ever, and their thirst for good leadership. So I talk to people a lot about it. If we have effective leaders, we're going to have greater retention, greater engagement. A lot of people are quiet quitting. They're sitting there nodding their head, going through the motions. But great leadership creates really engaged, loyal people. And I teach people how to be coaching leaders. And that's really my sub expertise, is to teach them how to really lean into being a good coach
Yeah, so
with
let's
their.
talk a little bit about that. You mentioned that coaching leader versus top down leader. Can you talk a little bit about what coaching leader looks like and how this approach has transformed businesses?
Yeah, I overuse the sports analogy. I'm not a huge sports fan. I've got a couple that I like, but on a team, you want to win, you want to be better, you want to compete. The world is a competitive place. So a coaching leader taps into the competitive spirit of people. It also has a backdrop of getting better. We all have to keep getting better. And that's in every industry, that Amy. And you could even be great this year, but 6 months later, there's a new competitor. There's a change to the market. So what I love about being a coaching leader is you're building that in. We're going to get better. We're going to review the game film and we're going to practice. This is a really important part of being a coaching leader. And I've been married for, I think, 38 years. It could be
Wow.
37 or 38. And you got to keep practicing that. And I'm a dad for a couple 30 somethings, and I'm practicing being a good dad, and I'm practicing being a good coach and a good neighbor and good citizen. So I think a coaching leader sets the right backdrop, and then it also creates a stronger relationship. When a typical manager or leader to employee relationship, there's a little feeling of kind of utility, or I'm just a number to you. But a coach really believes in you. And a coach, like, this is one of my favorite things too. My little league coach and I still have a good relationship for over 50 years. A coaching leader creates a connection that lasts a lifetime. And so that's why being a coaching leader really gets people more engaged, push past their comfort zone. A good coach can really stretch you, and we have to keep stretching each other. And so those are, I think, some of the key aspects of being a coaching leader.
Like that. You also talk about the rehearse. You mentioned this prior to our podcast: rehearse, perform, and change.
Yeah.
So how can leaders use this in their daily routines and improve their
Yeah.
effectiveness?
Yeah. It's what I call being a reflective practitioner. And that means that we're going to think about how we're going to perform. Then we're going to go perform. Then afterwards, we're going to look at it. And you can build that in so many ways. It can be a daily huddle, a weekly huddle, a monthly, a quarterly huddle. But that's where we sit down. And this is the other thing. And even at a daily or a weekly huddle, I do this with a lot of companies. I say, hey, Amy, share with me like a great moment from last week where you were like totally in the zone. And you're like, oh, and you tell me all about it. And I'm like, how did that happen? How'd it go? Conversely, tell me about a moment where you were like, oh my God, that was a total disaster. So those are learning moments. Those are really important. And the other thing, and part of that is this idea of a detached observer, to be curious, right? Like, rather than when that went terrible on Tuesday, to beat yourself up for 4 days and go, oh my God, why'd you do that? Oh, you screwed up so bad. It's just to be like, that's really weird. You be curious, like step back and go like, why did I blank? Why was I not prepared? Why did I lose my temper? So, a part of all of that is being detached, to be able to step back, because we get so emotionally tied into who we are, our
Yeah.
egos, looking good. So, that whole process really teaches people to be more objective and less emotional. And then we can be more curious. I'll just say this. I want to give a shout out to my 30-year-old son, William Walsh, who's a filmmaker, and he's, Dad, I'm looking at my body as an experiment. And so I'm really like a science project, thinking about what I'm eating and my workout and what's happening. And I'm like, that's so cool. And look at yourself as a professional, as an experiment. And be like, hey, this week I'm going to experiment with this and see how it goes. So become more detached. Now, that doesn't mean I don't care. Of course I care. Of course I want to be successful. But the more I can just get a little bit detached, the better I can be.
Yeah. I really like that. I actually started, it reminded me, I started this new challenge for myself. It's called where I'm like, I don't know. I heard this, it was some presentation that I listened to at Deloitte, and it was like the 1 degree, I think it was the 1 degree difference of your Olympian versus the
Mm,
person that the pro athlete that
yeah.
didn't win the award. And it's like 1% difference in their performance. It might have been three, but for some reason the 1% stuck in my head and very attainable in my mind. And as an entrepreneur, I was like, what if I just do 1% more in every area of my life?
And if you do it every day,
Yeah, and every
what
day.
happens? That's a great thing. And I actually did a video on that a few years ago. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
interesting. I don't know
yeah,
where it
because
popped into my mind, but I in today's day 3, and it's insane the amount of stuff that I've got done, things that I didn't think
yeah,
I'd ever be able to get done are done.
the
Yeah.
difference between first and second is many times just a couple of seconds.
Yeah. It's
You
so
think
true.
about that every day. But the other thing, back to what we are talking about, I want people to fall in love with that process. This is what I tell my 33-year-old daughter. If you can fall in love with the process of getting better, then you really have something.
Yeah.
Because look, this is life. Every day is going to send you challenges and send you an obstacle. So I spend a lot of time talking about resilience and mindset, because every day you are going to face new challenges. And the best thing you can do is be resilient to face those. And then you have your process of practicing, stepping back, looking at it, and you do that over and over. And that's what creates long term success.
Yeah, I love that. So being curious about how to work with a team is something you encourage leaders to do. So how can leaders cultivate and maintain the sense of curiosity?
The first thing that came to my mind is for them to be curious, for them to model it. It's the most important thing. You've been around people before that are maybe pretend, or maybe they're saying something. Oh, how's it going, Amy? Or what's happening? But you see them drifting, looking off. You give them a good answer and they don't even respond to it. People can tell when you are genuinely curious, when you really care. And so the first thing is to model that. Then the second thing would be to see the benefits of it. So again, the more we start practicing having a curious mind, the more we're going to see good results and have different ways of looking at it. So the problem sometimes with leaders is we get a buzzword or two, or we say something that we think sounds like a good thing to say. We don't model it. And I hear that so often. And I get to work with so many leaders and young, old, different types of teams. And that's one of the things I hear the most often is they're talking about X and Y and Z, but they don't do that. And it's, yeah, people know that. They can smell bullshit from a mile away and they won't put up with it. So
Uh,
you really have to be genuine. You have to be curious. So don't tell your team to be curious and you're not curious. So that would be one of the biggest ways.
I like that. So, what unique challenges do family businesses face, and how do you help them navigate the complexities without sacrificing their personal relationships? I think that's so huge because, man, things can get pretty heated inside of a family, right?
Families are like the most complicated, and that's part of the reason I'm drawn to that. Although I have to tell you, and I told you before we got started too, I do a lot of work in non-family businesses. And you know what? They have a lot of the same attributes of a family. There's a clique, there's a favorite in the group. There's like a favorite vice president, and everybody goes, "Oh, we know that he's her favorite vice president." So it's all very similar, sibling rivalries. The thing in family is, though, it goes way back to our childhood. So it's just, oh my God, my brother's been bugging me since forever. And now we're in the business and he's still doing this same stuff. Like when he would steal my cereal at the breakfast table, now he's stealing my customers in the business. So we tend to put this bigger, deeper, lifelong pursuit on it. And again, I go back to detach, depersonalize it, set all that aside. Okay, we're professionals here. Back to the sports analogy in basketball, because a client said this, my friend Kerry Coburg in Iowa, he said, "Coach, sometimes we got sharp elbows, me and my brother. Like we're under the hoop, we're like fighting for the ball, but which is fine. But he's like really elbowing me hard." Being compassionate with each other, being decent, respectful, okay? We got to treat each other well. But in a family business, it becomes like this bigger, deeper, meaningful thing. But the other thing is, then now my wife doesn't get along with my sister's husband. And so it again just gets that much more complicated. So I teach them to, like, here's your family activity and here's your business activity. Separate those two. And in my family, again, I practice this. I was so mad at my uncle. We were going over to Thanksgiving dinner. And when I walked in, I was like, "How you doing?" I gave him a big hug. And I know my son was thinking, like, "That's weird. On the way over, I heard you talking about how angry you were that he took that account away from you, or he gave you this new assignment." I was modeling that even if we have our differences, when you're at the family table, put that aside. And people struggle with that a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That
mean,
would be
just
difficult.
now, come on. For uh, how much time do we have to coach you?
Yeah,
Forgiveness.
right. Well,
Forgiveness.
I was thinking, what if I ended up marrying a fellow entrepreneur, which I probably would, right? If I ended up getting married, it
Yeah.
would have to be as
Yeah.
intense as I am. And that would be a challenge, not to kill each
Well,
other.
a couple things that I say. One is loving compassion. I study Buddhism. My Buddhism makes me a better Christian, but loving compassion. We are all flawed creatures, right? We
Yeah.
all are trying to find our way. So the more you think you're like your sister, she's been like this forever, it's just let all that go. And one of the favorite things that I came up with, I saw in the recent years, which I just love, is how you treat me is your karma. How I respond is mine. So if your sister's a bitch, you could go, okay, that's her deal. But now
Yeah.
how I respond to that is my deal. So if
Yeah.
I let her push, I hear that all the time. Oh, they really know how to push my buttons. It's like, why is anybody able to push your buttons? The more you are together, strong, resilient, you can watch your sister flail around on her own without having to get caught up in the mix. So again, all of this work is about calming down, being more aware, being
Yeah.
more centered, right?
Yeah.
And but families are super complicated.
Yeah, definitely. So,
Oh, I have to say real quick,
yeah.
I hired a therapist to help our family recently. And the therapist said, "Oh, what about this and that?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so good." And then I was telling somebody in there, "That's weird because you're in the business of helping families. Can you see the back of your head right now?" No, you can't.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need people that can see things in ways that you can't see them. And
Oh, yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's so helpful to have outside perspective, good
Yeah.
outside help. Yeah.
Yeah, and even if you already know, having someone remind you. I'll go out there and I'll listen to experts in the same space that I'm in, just because I like to be reminded, right?
Remind,
Yeah,
put it back in your mind. So that's coaching. That's where the best athletes and performers, guess what they do? They practice. They don't just show up and start playing the first game at the beginning of the year. Musicians practice. Vladimir Horowitz was the best piano player on the planet. He said, if I stop practicing for a day, I notice. In 2 days, my wife notices. And in 3 days, the critics notice. And I thought, wow, that really gets me because he's like the most talented piano player. And he has to keep practicing to stay the best piano player. Most
Yeah.
people aren't, you never really have it. And you got to practice.
Yeah. That's so
And
good.
then when you fall in love with practicing, now you have something,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
right? Yeah.
So you have a leadership team workout that helps employees by improving their managers. What are some of the key behaviors and attitudes that you believe exemplify great leadership?
Great listening for sure. So important, man. In today's world, again, everybody's on their device, looking away, showing up late, not being present. So, learning to be a good listener, learning to be present, learning to connect with people. Okay. Hey, I just got to write an article in Costco Connection magazine that went to 15 million people and then went into Europe. They picked it up in Europe. And I said in there, people don't care how much till they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And that's really it. You have to care about people. And people will see right through it if you don't. If you want to be a good leader and you want to do it for a long time, then you better genuinely care about people.
Yeah.
Don't just try to check the box off. See, that's what people do. They're like, oh, I heard I'm supposed to be a better listener. Oh, okay, God, I got to listen to Amy again. Oh, geez. And all right, but I'm going to do it. That's not going to work. You have to genuinely care about how Amy's doing and what happened and what's happening with that new product launch or how did it go at her family reunion. You have to genuinely care about people. And I
Yeah.
think, and you have to take the time to do that. You got to have the heart to do that because that's the other thing that we haven't talked about really, but you have to make the time for it.
Yeah.
Okay. And it takes time. And so people will say to me, like, we don't have time for this, coach, or I don't have time. It's just easier for me to do it myself. Remember, feed them a fish, feed them for a day, teach them to fish, feed them for a lifetime. So you want to take the time. You want to teach people how to be more reflective, to be vulnerable. That's another really good thing for a leader today is to be vulnerable.
Hmm.
Don't think that you're going to just show them that I've got it all figured out and I know what I'm doing. I've been doing it. People don't really, they want you to be real. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does. That's exactly the strategy that I give people when it comes to marketing their businesses.
Yeah,
And the messaging that I give, it's you have to care about everyone else, your ideal client's problems. What's top of their mind? What problem do they think that they have?
for sure.
Versus how smart you are. It's so easy to be a brain on a stick, especially like if you're on a platform like LinkedIn and you just go out there and share all this information. Nobody's going to care unless you start it with their problem, right? And it's interesting to your point of those that struggle with this whole concept. They're like, oh, but I'm so this and I'm this and I've got this certification and that certification and I'm so important. I'm so smart. And it's nobody cares. Nobody's going to hire you based off how smart you are. They're going to care. They're going to hire you based upon how much you care about them. It's the same thing. It's getting out of that mindset of being the brain on the stick and getting that
I
emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah, I was thinking of a couple things. One is the power of words. So now brain on a stick's going to be stuck in my mind for a long time. That's called like good storytelling, Amy. That's good use of metaphor or analogy or drawing a picture. I'm like brain on a stick. I had never thought about that. And the other thing is to be authentic.
Yeah.
Try to be yourself. Find your authentic voice. So when you're out there and you're like saying all this, because I know this is what I'm supposed to say, and here's my 6 bullet points, it's be real, man. That's another thing in Buddhism is be yourself. It's the easiest thing to do. Like you're yourself, by the way. I've been with you a few times now. You're yourself. That's great. You're Amy. You're just full of energy and excitement and life and caring for others. It's so much better. You never fake it. It's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be authentic, be
Yeah.
your real self and find what that is and get feedback from others. That's
Yeah.
how I found out about coaching. Like almost at the end of every coaching call, I'm like, what was valuable about today? And they're like, oh, when you said blue. When you said brain on a stick, I was like, oh my God, I never thought of that. And so that's ask people for feedback about what's working and not working, and they'll tell you some things that you didn't even know.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about driving business success and enjoying life. What are some of your recommendations around that?
I think about boundaries. I think about setting time. Actually, my son William gave me a device. It's not on this desk that you set a little timer and you can flip it over and then it does 15 minutes and then it does 30 minutes. You have to set boundaries, man. You have to say that's another deliberate practice. I'm going to work as smart and effective as I can between X and Y. And then I'm going to be present with my family to go do what I want to do, spend time on the weekend, spend time with friends. So many people like they're just I'm going to throw my whole body at it. And it's okay. You could do that. And at the end, you end up with this great business and your family moved out 3 months ago and you didn't even notice. You got to set some boundaries. You got to
Yeah.
say to yourself, I'm going to work this time frame on this and see how that goes. And I think, and I'll have to check with you, but I am absolutely passionate about what I do. Yet partly what I do is to allow me to go on a European vacation with my wife and to do different things and to have my home up here in the mountains where I'm at today or have my home in the desert. And they both kind of feed each other, but if one gets out of balance with the other, so hopefully you work partly to have the life that you want. But if you
Yeah.
just work for work's sake or identity, or back to what you said earlier, Amy, it's so good. Ego, man. Your ego will run you like and it's just
Right.
look how good I am, and I've got this much, and I did this, and I had this accolade. That's wait a second. So the relationships you have, the friendships you have, that's what's important. So that's why, like in coaching, we'll do like this thing like the wheel of life. Tell me about all parts of your life, your friends, your family, your physical, your spiritual, your work. But we are a very performance driven country right now. We're like in this super competitive mode.
Yeah.
So I think it's really great that you asked that question. And that's, I think, again, back to a good leader. I said that earlier. A good leader, oh, I want you to take time and to go to your son's graduation Friday afternoon or go to your daughter's ball game and really be present and me not on the phone calling you and asking you about stuff. So I think really great leaders want to build in some of that life balance for their team.
Yeah, it's so important. Gosh,
Don't you?
you made me
Yeah.
flash back actually working for Deloitte. I lost my niece and my nephew 6 months apart from each other in 2008. They
Wow.
both
So
passed away.
sorry.
Yeah, one was 13 years old and the Timothy was younger. And when I was, because they were my niece and nephew, I was not allowed to take off bereavement. And I was not approved for any vacation time. And I'm like, I just lost a family member
Yeah.
and you're not allowing, and that's part of the reason why I got so burnt out working for a big four. And I'm
I
glad
was
that I
just
worked for
gonna,
myself.
yeah.
Like,
These giant monolithic companies, I can see where they're coming from too, which is if I start making 23 exceptions, it's going to be 23,000 exceptions. So I
yeah,
think that's why there's an opportunity to have a good mid-sized business that has some flexibility, that can express your own personality. And again, I think a lot of people are not that interested in putting up with some of that from the big corporate.
yeah, a lot of people are exiting, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was one of them.
Yeah. Good for you.
So you have a book, Coach to Win the Leadership Game. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, the backdrop is me and my little league coach and how he used to have us do this deliberate practice. We would get on the field and we would rehearse. And it was so funny because then when I got in business 20 years later, I was like doing that. And so that's where all that started. And it talks about different kinds of deliberate practices. It has different kind of real life stories in there. And then my other book is called The Family Business Playbook. And that book has all sorts of really practical, tangible exercises that people can do on their own, learning to give and receive feedback, learning to set goals, learning to have family values. Most of my work is practical. I love theoretical ideas. I love philosophy and big discussions. And what I want is something that is practical that we can work on today. Do you follow me? So
Yeah,
both of those books have a lot of practical advice that can be implemented quickly.
love that. What do you think has been your truth that's gotten you this far in your journey?
I'm resilient, for starters. I lost my first brother when I was 5, when I was 9 and he was 5, and that just kicked me right in the teeth. And it's be resilient, man, if you want to, and if you want something. And again, that's back to my thing. I'm just even hearing it as I'm hearing it. It's like fall in love with the process, fall in love with getting better, and be resilient. And if you're not challenged, if you're not getting knocked down a time or two, if you're not a little bit scared now and then, you're not probably pushing yourself enough. So I think just really, when I was a little kid, I was out there shooting hoops in the front yard, trying to get better at that. And 2 days ago, I was out on the grass hitting the golf ball, trying to get better at that. And later today, I'm going to try to get better at being a better husband. Try to reach your potential. I think that is a really cool, it's like chasing the sunset, right? It's like you
Yeah.
never actually get it, but chasing it is a lot of fun.
I heard someone defined resiliency as riding the waves, learning to ride the
Yeah.
waves. Would you
Yeah,
agree?
definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I thought
Yeah.
that was a good definition. I was like, oh, okay, riding the waves, being willing to ride the waves, whatever may
Yeah.
come at your way.
Yeah, and it can be unpredictable. The other thing I was thinking about earlier, and I'm preparing for a talk I'm doing shortly, is the greatest source of renewable energy is your own personal energy when you get up every morning and to go and get after it. I'm meticulous about my sleep habits. My wife teases me because she's always, oh, wait, okay, I got it. Your sleep time. I got to go to sleep at a certain time, get up at a certain time, sleep hygiene, it's called. If you take good care of yourself, then you're going to have good energy to bring all this other stuff. It's good, but if you stay up binge watching some series till 2 in the morning and then don't get enough sleep, it's going to be hard to be your best. So really take good care of yourself so you can bring that energy and you have it every day. And that's back to my son William's thing about be real careful about the food you put in your body, the shows you watch, listen to, what I have on in the radio in the car. My coach 30 years ago was like, what do you have on in the car? And I'm just like, ah, whatever. And he's turned it off. And I turned it off like 30 years ago. I'm in silence a lot. Be really careful about what you put in your body in any way, shape, or form. And that'll all impact how you do.
Yeah, I
Right?
love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I can
Yeah.
testify to that in a huge way. And
Yeah.
I did the same thing. I'm mostly silent. And it's funny because yesterday I had music on and my dog that sits next to me all day while I'm working wasn't having it
Ah,
because she's
well,
not used
doll.
to it, right? She's
No,
used to pure silence and she's taking a nap and now I'm listening to music. She's, what's this?
that's
So
another thing. I'm going to come back in my next life as my wife's dog because my dog, man, that dog had it made. And I was like his manservant. He's just like looks at his watch. It's like time for a walk and time to do
yeah,
this. And so,
yeah,
yeah, don't mess with the dog.
I,
Dogs are present, right?
yeah,
Dogs, unconditional love. No matter what happened, you come home, they love to see you. We
yeah,
can learn a lot from dogs too. Oh, real quick, fast story. I had a where I was officing, the guy had a dog named Hazel. He still got Hazel. He's a good friend of mine. And Hazel would come in the conference room when I was doing my group coaching sessions, and Hazel was just awesome. Then when I would start doing my spiel, Hazel would go scratch at the door and leave. That was embarrassing. She's, I've seen these slides before, but you can learn a lot from a dog, and a dog will teach you how to be present, have unconditional love. And so on the bill, I would send to the client, I would say 3 hours of group coaching and upcharge because Hazel was in there. The dog was an extra benefit, but you could learn a lot from dogs.
Yeah, I need to do that because every once in a while someone will say, "Oh, I see your dog behind you." And she's a Pomeranian. She's super cute.
I think I met her at one
Yeah.
of our first meetings. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
If you were able to give yourself one piece of advice when you first started out on your journey, what would it be?
Have fun. Have fun. I lost two of my best friends in the 30s, and that's when we bought this home up here in the woods 20 years ago, which we shouldn't have done. It was like, who goes and buys a second house when you're just starting a coaching business? But it's I got really clear about, you better have some fun, man, because this
Yeah.
is not a dress rehearsal. So whatever you do, and that's what I say too, and that's part of the reason you and I are here doing this. You're fun to be around. You've got great energy. Hang around with people you enjoy hanging around.
Yeah.
If you're just the same thing in that leadership stuff. If you're leading a bunch of people you don't want to be around, that's not going to work either. So surround yourself with the kind of people that you want to be around, the kind of people that are going to raise you up. Mostly have some fun because life's short.
It's so important. And that's a really good reminder for myself too, because it's so easy for me to workaholic. And it's not that in some ways I need to right now in the phase of my business, but I have to make sure to do my hobbies and those types of things. Otherwise I burn myself out and then I can't do anything anyway. It,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. And there's seasons. That's back to waves. There's seasons as an entrepreneur. There's this thing like a rocket ship. You've got to really do a lot of work to get it off the ground and out into orbit. Then you're steering it a little bit less. So there's moments like that. But take good care of yourself because that's the thing. And if you don't take care of your body, your mind, you're not going to make it either. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
started to do bodybuilding again. In my 30s, I grew up with parents that were both bodybuilders and marathon
Oh
runners.
wow.
Yeah, and so grew up pretty healthy and being taught. My dad brought me to work out with Mr. America at age
Oh, wow.
13.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was in the gym at age 13 and crying on the gym. My dad put me in some contraption and I'd be crying. He taught me, got me the gloves to protect my hands. And I actually was in a car accident in 2000. I was disabled
Oh
for 8
gosh.
years. I couldn't walk. Yeah.
Wow.
3 surgeries to reconstruct my left arm. It's all metal. And the doctors told me that I was going to have more surgery on my knee and I was
Mm,
never going to use my
mm.
arm again. It would never be straight and it's perfectly fine. But it's because I got into bodybuilding. I had said to
Wow.
them, I said, "What if I get buff and I turn myself into a bodybuilder? Will I be able to walk again? Will I be able to do stuff?" And they said, "Absolutely." So I actually entered a contest, and the first month was I didn't really get it much traction. But then in over 2 month period of time, I went from a size 12 to a 4. I gained 10 pounds of muscle. I beat 54
Wow.
million people in the contest. And yeah, and I turned myself into a very buff woman. Got the photos done, all the professional, the tanning, doing all the stuff. So I'm in my 50s now, and I've got all the stuff here. I got my weight benches, I got all my stuff. I know how to do it. And so I started to do the weightlifting again and just decided I'm just going to be bodybuilder type. I don't know. I might do some competitions. I don't know that I will. I'm not really, enjoy the actual competition to get me motivated, but I'm not too much into going on the stage and doing all that. And I don't know that I want to get that beefy, but if I can be strong in my older age, I know I can do more. And I haven't eaten sugar since 2015. I just eat
Wow.
vegetables and I keep the protein at a minimum, enough to gain
Yeah.
muscle, but I try not to do all the fatty stuff. But yeah, and I get my gut tests and from Ombre Lab, which I'm so passionate about that because it's
Uh,
transformed my life. Um,
wow.
yeah, I don't know if you've heard of that, but it
I
basically,
just wrote it down. That's great.
yeah, it's Ombre Lab. And what's amazing about it, and this is a little tangent, but I feel like it's transformed my life on so many levels. Because the first time I took it, it said that I was about to get colon cancer. All of the
Oh,
bacteria that would overgrow to allow colon cancer to take form was overgrown.
oh,
And that's in my DNA anyway, to get colon cancer, and also heart diseases in my DNA, like all these different things that you're prone to. And I went on their diet that they told me to eat for my gut, and I wiped out all of the bacteria. It all went
wow.
away. I was able to reverse all of it. And then they upgraded their tests, and now it'll tell you what foods you're allergic to. It will tell you what vitamins you can and cannot process. So
Oh,
you know what to supplement. Like I wasn't absorbing K2 or B12. So
oh,
now I take extra of those, and that transformed me. And then and every time you take the test, it tells you a new diet, because
that's
obviously
awesome.
just having,
Huh.
that keeping things new and giving your body new nutrients is so important. Yeah. So that's transformed my life. I do that every 3 to 6 months, and just to stay on top
Wow.
of it. And
How do you spell that?
it's OMBRE lab.com, or you can go on, you can actually get them on Amazon too. Ombre Lab gut test. It's
Oh,
phenomenal.
wow.
Yeah.
See, I learned something. That was the other
Yeah.
thing I was going to say. Keep learning. The other thing I was going to say is when I'm with you, you usually laugh like 6 times, and laughter is the best medicine. So keep laughing
Yeah.
too. You're doing a great job. You're making a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And whatever you do, when you talked about bodybuilding, all that stuff, whatever you do, you're going to be very successful. So
Oh, thank you so much.
that's
So
another coaching and leadership technique, is helping validate people, helping letting them know that it's you're on the right track, but you're a live wire and it's great.
I am definitely a live wire.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a really good description of me. I like that. I like that terminology. Pete, if there are individuals that are listening that would love to work with you, what's the best way to contact you?
I have 2 sites. One is familybusinessperformance.com. Pretty easy to remember, Family Business Performance. And the other is peakcoach.com. Peak like mountaintop, peakcoach.com. And those both have lots of information about my methodology, what I do, my client list. And I love helping people, and I want to help any way that I can. I'm like a golden retriever that likes to fetch the ball, is what I say to people. I'm just like, just let's go fetch the ball together, figure out how your team can get better. So that's what I love to do.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your expertise.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Yes, definitely. If you're listening to this podcast, you want more information about this podcast or upcoming shows, you can visit acalltothrive.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week.